I work at cross country.
I'm gonna be
team. I
All
work
right.
at cross country.
All right, guys. So, all right. If you got your Bibles, huh? No, it does not. All right. So, if you got your Bibles, open them up to 1 Samuel 22. And we'll get there in a minute. I want to talk to you guys a minute before we get there. We'll read 1 Samuel 22. So, some of you guys have started school like this week. Some of you guys are starting in the next week or two. One thing I can guarantee though, there is nobody in this room that last August was looking ahead a year and you were like, dude, that's what it's going to be like. For some of you guys, you're starting like high school, or you're starting middle school, or you're starting like going down like a different path of like homeschool or something like that, and you're starting down this different things are changing with school a lot. But it's not what you thought it was going to be like. We can all be honest. Kind of trying to with everything that you guys are dealing with too. Some of the things that you're dealing with is like, as with like COVID and just everything that we've been dealing with it, with school coming up. There's a lot of disappointment. There's a lot of like stress and frustration. Just about how things are right now. Because no matter who you are, this year is not what you thought it was going to be. 2020 has become a joke. It's become, I mean, you know, I love the memes just as much as anybody. It's like, you know, it just turned August, so it's like, you know, what is August going to bring this month? You know, I love that one with that woman bent over and she's like, what chapter of Revelation are we in? You know, each month it seems like something different's happening. It's been a dumpster fire of a year pretty much so far. I get it. But everybody in this room has probably thought about it at least at one point, or maybe even said out loud. You've thought about this idea that like things shouldn't be this way, or this was not how I pictured it going. And statements like that come with a lot of like disappointment. They come with a lot of frustration. They come with a lot of like anxiety. They come with a lot of fear about like what's next, because we don't actually know what it could look like next. But I want to try and like encourage you a little bit tonight about that. David in the Bible, King David, he's usually pictured, you know, we think of these great things about David. And I don't know about you, but maybe sometimes we kind of get in this path where we think that everything was just like super smooth for him. But it wasn't that way. David, when we first meet him and as we first start to kind of go through the Bible, when we first start to see him, we see like David from a very early age when he was like probably like around Judah or Matthew's age. Like he was anointed to be the next king of Israel. Can one of y'all imagine like someone coming up and being like, you know what? You're going to rule the most powerful nation in the world soon. Would you freak out a little bit? Kind of. I would lose it. But it was a big thing. He was anointed to be the king of Israel. He had conquered Goliath. He had beat the giant that nobody else could beat or would even take on. He had become the military leader of the strongest military in the entire world. And on top of all that, the king, Saul, had actually given him his daughter to marry. David probably at some point in all this sat back and he kind of could see the course of his life and how things were going to go. He's like, well, God's anointed me that I'm going to be the next king of Israel. I'm married to the king's daughter. I have wiped out all these nations in the military with my military campaigns. Things are going great. Next year's going to be awesome. But then something crazy happens. Saul, the current king of Israel, becomes jealous. And I'm going to pick on you tonight, okay? So you're David tonight, so all the abuse is going to come to you. So he's like, all right, David has done all these amazing things. People are singing songs about him. People are talking about how he's going to be the greatest king Israel's ever had. But I'm sitting up here and I'm king. So I become jealous. So I make the decision, the rational decision, that how I'm going to handle this is I'm going to kill him. Okay, a couple of y'all are listening. Okay, good. So, so I make the decision that I'm going to kill him. And then you know what? They're going to sing songs about me again because I'm going to be the king again. And there's a lot here, and I'm not going to get into all that. But the jealous king makes the decision he's going to kill David. And overnight, he goes from knowing exactly how things are going to running for his life. And this wasn't just something that he ran for his life for a couple days. He actually spent the next 10 years of his life running in fear, wondering what tomorrow was going to bring, wondering what if he was going to live, wondering what the course of his life was going to look like. And we're just going to read these two verses kind of as his story. So he runs for 10 years, and he actually ends up in this cave. And this was a lot easier to read on my computer than it probably is for you guys, but it's 1 Samuel 22, verses 1 and 2. Does anybody want to read that? Chantel, thank you.
David therefore departed thence and escaped to the cave of
Adullam.
And when his brethren and all his father's house heard it, they went down thither to him, and everyone that was in distress, and everyone that was in debt, and everyone that was in
Contented.
and gathered themselves unto him, and he became captain over them, and they were with him about 400 men.
All right, so David, he started out and he was going to rule. He was the military leader of Israel. He was the anointed king. And then overnight, it says that David departed and escaped to a cave. He went and he hid in a cave. And he went from leading thousands, tens of thousands, to he had 400 people that were following him, that were with him. There's a really good lesson with these people that we're not going to get into tonight, but when things get hard, you're going to see who your real family or who your real friends are, who really cares. But in this moment, I can just see David kind of like sitting in the cave on a rock, wondering the question that we all ask: why? God, you had all this planned out for me. You made all these promises to me. Why am I hidden in this cave now? Why am I running for my life? And as you guys are facing what is probably, and I don't mean to be extremely uplifting and stuff like that tonight, I'm sorry, but what's probably going to be kind of a rough school year, just with everything going on. There's going to be times when you sit there and you're probably like, wow, man, why is this going on? Why is this happening? Why is it like this? And you might even wonder if God's listening. And that's one of the things is like when we get in these bad situations and these bad times happen, we start to ask the question why. We start to wonder if God's even listening to us. We feel abandoned by God. And I realize that comparing David running from his life from an entire nation to us dealing with online school and like some of the things going on with that, it's a big jump. But for a lot of us, this is, I mean, it is our life, and it's something huge that we're dealing with. So it's okay if you come to this point where you have to ask that question, why? It's okay if you come to this point when you in a moment of weakness, you wonder, man, is God even listening? Because David prayed that very prayer himself at times. He would say, God, are you there? God, can you hear me? As we see in several different places, David was a man after God's own heart. Out of God's mouth, he said that. So one of the most important things that you guys can understand, one of the most important lessons that you can learn from this, is you have to ask yourself this question. Is your faith in your circumstances, or is your faith in God? Is your faith in your circumstances, or is your faith in God? And what I mean by that is a lot of times, like when times get bad, man, we just bail. And we just kind of abandon our faith. Or vice versa. A lot of people go towards God when things get bad. And then things start to get good, and they're like, oh, never mind. God understands. I'm just busy with all this other important stuff. And they're out. This is a scary question. Because when things are going bad or when things are going good, we tend to let that dominate our thinking. And we tend to let that dominate which direction we're going. But when our faith is in God, your circumstances don't drive who you are. Your circumstances don't define who you are. Your circumstances are just something that you're going through. There's many people like David, like Paul. Paul was beaten, and he eventually lost his life for his service of God. And you know what? He didn't sit there as he went to give up his head for God, thinking, man, I can't believe he's going to let me cut my head off. I abandoned all this stuff. But that's kind of how we act. It's like when things are bad, we're like, God's promised that, you know what, it's just going to be just an easy road all my life. Which he hasn't. But somehow we think he has. So we put our faith in good circumstances. We put our faith in bad circumstances. And that's where we grow. And we just ignore God. And the fact that when your faith is in God, your circumstances don't matter. And that's the lesson in this. And that's the thing that you have to get from this. When you're trusting in God, when you're embracing Him completely, it doesn't matter what 2020 looks like. It doesn't matter how good next year might be or how bad next year might be. It doesn't matter what you've been through this year. Because your faith is in God, not in the things that are happening to you. And your life is not determined by the difficult circumstances that you face. You know, your life is not, you're not defined that, you know what, man, it's been a rough year. So, Matthew, we're just going to define you as 2020 and some bad circumstances. When you're 50, I'm going to walk up to you and I'm going to be like, man, you had a rough year in 2020. That's all I'm going to know you as. We're not defined by maybe something that happens with our family. We're not defined by something that happens with our friends. We're not defined by maybe even a decision that we make. You're more than a single decision in your life. You're defined by your relationship with God. You're His or you're not. Romans 8:28. It says, and we know that all things work together for good to them that love God and to them who are called according to His purpose. And I was thinking about this verse today. And there's going to come a day, and just in case, and I hate to ruin the end of this book for anybody, just in case you haven't read it. I spoiler alert, I know we were talking about that with Spider-Man earlier, but God wins. All right. At the end, God wins. Period. Now, all the decisions that you make on the way there, they matter, and God uses them to form you to see people saved. God uses all your decisions. He's given you the free will to make those decisions. But in the end, God wins. And in Philippians chapter 2, it tells us that everybody is going to stand before God one day. Everybody's going to kneel before God and worship Him. Believer and non-believer. Because when you go before God, you're not going to think about anything else. And you see, we're going to go before God one day, and at the end, when He has won and He has put evil in its place, and we're going to stand before God one day. And I guarantee you this, you're not going to stand before God and after everything that's happened in your life, whether it's 100 years down the road or whether it's tomorrow, you're not going to stand before God and you're not going to look at Him and you're not going to be like, I had to do school online in 2020. Man, I had a rough year. School sucked. My siblings annoyed me so bad. I have 6 toes.
What?
You're not going to stand before Him and say any of those things. You see, when you stand before God, regardless of what your circumstances have been, the only thing that you're going to be able to do is just worship Him. And that's it. That is it. And you see, that's not just a lesson for the end, but that's a lesson for now. Because when we keep our eyes on the right things, we're not focused on all the bad stuff around us. We're not focused on all the struggles when we're keeping our eyes on the right things. You don't have to wait till that day when you stand before God to make the decision, you know what? All that stuff didn't matter then because I can see God now. Because sitting in your seat tonight, you can see Him just as clearly as you'll see Him then. You can see Him in the love that His Son had for you, in the way that He gave His life. You can see Him in the changed lives of men and women all around you. You can see Him in the way that people love each other in the church. You can see Him in creation and the world that He gave us. You can see Him in the fact that you have the free will to make a choice to follow Him or to not. But you can see Him everywhere. And sitting in your chair tonight, you can make the decision that, you know what? I'm going to keep my eyes on the right things so that I don't focus on all this junk around me. So that I don't focus on all this bad stuff around me. Because one day, whether you choose it now or not, that's going to be your opinion. That's good. Everything is going to pass away, and everything is going to be just distantly in your mind. And the only thing that you're going to think about is, man, that's God. That's my Savior. That's the only thing that's going to matter. So why would we wait till then? Why would we wait till then? This upcoming school year, this year, your life maybe. It may not have been what you've always wanted it to be or what you've dreamed it to be, and it might not always been the way you pictured it. But when you see God and you see the right things, you're not going to be focusing on all the other stuff around you. You're not going to care about the stuff as much, if at all. Because I totally believe this. I think that you can get so God-focused in your life that the bad stuff that happens around you in your life, it's just water off your back. But you have to make that decision. Because if you don't make that decision and you just decide, we'll see how it goes, man, I promise you right now, it's not going to work. You could wake up tomorrow and you're going to be like, well, if today goes okay, I'm going to start trying to focus better. And you know what the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to bash your little toe on the dresser. And then, boom, your day's gone.
Ain't that the truth?
And the only thing that you can focus on is the bad then. Because, man, our emotions and the way that we view stuff, it's like tidal waves. It takes one bad thing, and then the only thing that we can think about is every other bad thing that has ever happened to us. You know, I can have one person look at me wrong, and then the next thing, it's like 5 minutes later, and I'm thinking about something Alicia said to me 5 years ago that just didn't sit real right. Didn't actually make me totally mad, but 5 years later and in the wrong mood, I am consumed with what she said, and I'm furious. And she comes home happy, and I'm like, what?
I forgot. Sorry.
But we get that way. It takes one bad thing, and then it's the next thing, it's the next thing, and it's the next thing. That's all we focus on is the bad. And as you're dealing with a lot of challenges, there's plenty that you're going to be able to focus on that frankly upsets you and gets you messed up and gets you frustrated. But if you make the decision to keep your eyes on the right things and to focus on the good, and it takes work. All right, I'm going to confess something to you guys, okay? Here in a minute, I'm going to ask you to choose, and I'm hoping that everybody in this room is like, yes, I'm going to choose to be happy because that's better, right? And then everyone's going to choose that, and then, you know, I hope that's what happens. But then, you know what is going to happen? It's going to be hard. You know, it's not easy. You're not going to say, yes, I'm going to choose to be happy. I'm going to choose to focus on God. I'm going to choose to think about the right things and to focus on the right things. And then the first thing that's going to happen, that dresser. And you're not just going to catch your little toe, but you're going to catch your hip, and then you're not going to be able to walk for 3 days. And it's going to take work, and it's going to take effort. But you can still find something positive in that. Dude, I know people that can find something positive in anything. Alicia's dad used to be that way. You would come in after you totaled your car, you lost 17 family members, and you would walk in the house and he'd be like, let me tell you about something cool that happened today. And he could find the joy in anything, and he could find happiness in something positive in any situation. He could find it in the mornings. It's possible. But you have to make that decision. And you have to commit to it and realize that it's going to take a little bit of work. You know, I know and I realize that there are some people out there that just want to be miserable. All right? That they wake up and their sole purpose is just to wake up and all day long be like, oh, this sucks. That's their catchphrase. And we've got a couple in here. I see some hands going up on that one. But I know that there are some people that are just like that, and that's how they want to be, but that is not existence. God has not created you to sit around and be like, man, this sucks all day long. God has created you more for that. When times got tough, David could have folded. Sitting in that cave, he could have so easily thrown his hands up in the air and been like, man, I saw something totally different happening. Here I am in a cave, running for my life. I quit. That'd have been easy to do. The easiest thing in the world to do is quit. To give up, just to throw in the towel. That's the easiest thing you'll ever do in your life. But David made a choice to do something else. If you've got your Bibles, if your Bible's on your phone, I want you all to go to this place with me. Go to Psalm 63. Psalm 63. Psalm 63. All right. There's something important about this I want you to understand. David wrote this psalm in the cave. David wrote this psalm running for his life in a cave when it had all fallen down around him. And I want you to read this with me. Just read it yourself as I read this. He says, O God, thou art my God. Early will I seek thee. My soul thirsteth for thee. My flesh longeth for thee in a dry and thirsty land. where no water is. To see thy power and thy glory, so as I have seen thee in the sanctuary. Because thy loving kindness is better than life, my lips shall praise thee. Thus will I bless thee while I live. I will lift up my hands in thy name. My soul shall be satisfied as with marrow and fatness, and my mouth shall praise thee with joyful lips. When I remember thee upon my bed and meditate on thee in the night watches, because thou hast been my help. Therefore in the shadow of thy wings will I rejoice. My soul followeth hard after thee. Thy right hand upholdeth me. But those that seek my soul to destroy it, they shall go into the lower parts of the earth. They shall fall by the sword. They shall be a portion for foxes. But the king shall rejoice in God. Everyone that sweareth by him shall glory, but the mouth of them shall speak lies, shall be stopped. Does that sound like something a defeated man wrote? Does that sound like someone who had just thrown their hands up and given up had written? David wrote this beautiful song, this beautiful song of praise, of commitment, in one of the lowest points of his life. And when he did that, God delivered him. Because he never lost sight of God. It might not have been what he thought it was going to be, but in all honesty, God had more for him and something better and bigger planned than David ever looked through. So yeah, it's going to be a difficult year. There's going to be some struggles. But if we keep our eyes on him and not on the bad in our lives, and we commit to him and we make the decision that, you know what, man, I'm going to worship him even in my cave, even in my struggle, I'm going to look to him. Man, if we do that, God is not going to use this as the last chapter in your story. But he's going to use this as the first chapter in one of the greatest stories ever written. But you have to make that decision. Yeah, that you're going to do it, that you're going to follow him. So if everybody bow your heads and close your eyes.